Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast, as well as the game streams, website, and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. And even a single dollar helps. And for those who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for episode 119 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on February 2nd, 2018, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to our live chat here. Thank you so much for joining us for another evening back in the tower. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have the man who has been said has the voice of a flower, an individual who goes by many names, Justin Sane 0516. Justin, what guise have you donned for tonight's chat?
Since no one will be able to see it in all its glory, my nickname for tonight is Ahamkara. So, you can call me Carl. Or
Carl!
Or Carl for short. No, yes. Good to be back. Very sorry I missed last week. I had a sick youngling. Yeah, that was about all of it.
I'll leave the episode 3 jokes out of that one.
Yeah, but I am a lucky duck because he pulled out of it nicely. He didn't murder, like the rest of the Jedi or anything.
Oh,
he got over
I was actually going to go more towards thank God for Obi-Wan because at least he saved him, right? Right? It's just like that picture of Obi-Wan that circulates. Yeah, it's just like that picture that circulates around that goes, I bet you won't share this picture of Jesus, and really it's just freaking Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi.
and then you just remember that Anakin is Hayden Christensen, and you're okay with him burning to death.
No.
Well, that went dark fast.
Well, that was bad enough with the youngling talk.
Well, also alongside us, we have our master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, hope you're doing well. You looking forward to tonight's chat?
I am, and I'm actually, for everybody who's like, that's a stretch for Justin's name, I'm the other half of the joke right now. I am Ahamkara.
She's very happy about that.
I have never wanted anything but for a woman to refer to me as the other half of the joke. Like, that is... We're in dream country right now.
Yes. Teamwork makes the dream work, honey.
I'm high-fiving you.
I'm high-fiving you.
I high-five back. We have a high-five button in our new setup kind of thing, so we're high-fiving.
We also have the grizzly bearded cultivator of Spinfoil himself, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing tonight? I'm gonna die.
See, this is the joke, though, because I'm part 3 of all of this little joke that's going on, and it's, I hate these puns.
No, you don't. You lie.
Carry on with them, I suppose.
Your wayward son.
Don't. Oh, we were just doing a shocking earlier before the show.
Listen.
Now we get this. And that song I would sing, I'd be okay with that.
Beard. Just chill. Hi. There'll be peace when you are done. Okay?
Don't you cry. Anything. Blue help. Quick, blue help.
So last week we asked the community, are the worm gods in Ahamkara related? I'm trying so hard.
I know.
The responses are in. Green, would you give us the answer?
Okay. You good? You good, guys?
No, I think I can breathe still.
Okay. God. Oh man. As far as what Twitter thought, We had 121 votes. The 3 choices were yes, the Ahamkara are related to worm gods, maybe they're related, or no, they're not related. And it broke down a little bit weirder than I thought it would. Like, I didn't expect it to go this way at all. I figured most people would say yes, it's related to Ahamkara, which they did. It's 52%. But we had a huge contingency that was like 36% maybe, and only 12% of people thought no. So community thinks Ahamkara are related to the worm gods. It's probably because of the card that was read or going to be read in the summary coming up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually curious about the people who are strongly opposed to it. I would be curious as to like the logic there, and like
the
reason why.
Yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of people give me like actual reasonings for yes or no, but there were a few, and I don't think anybody who said no gave me a reason for it. I don't see one right now. So if you have a reason for it,
no one showed their work.
I had some people show their work. It's just, when a teacher tells you to show your work and you can just get to the answer, I get it. If you can get to the answer, it's nice to show your work, guys.
Yeah.
Right?
I just wrote the word work.
Yeah, I'm gonna go cry in a corner because I don't work anymore, and this is bringing back old feelings, guys.
I didn't know we were grading papers on this show.
Well, so we appreciate all the feedback on that, and I'm really curious about the people who are like really opposed to that. So I guess the question is, what is this week's question? Beard, you're not allowed to answer this one.
Right.
I asked the group, hey, what's the community feedback question for this week? And Beard immediately, next community question, how many monsters have you hunted? Like,
if you want to put that in as extra credit, yes, you can put that in as extra credit under the tweet.
Yay.
So, I don't for community feedback for this upcoming week. Oh, what are you guys thinking?
What is the next show again?
Reef and Awoken.
Well, there's an obvious one.
I know there's an obvious one, but it's so. Do we want to ask that one?
Why don't we ask? Do Awoken have 2 souls?
I got another good one too.
Go for it.
Harbingers.
Oh yes, yeah. I agree.
I like that one.
Mm-hmm. So where we could kind of go with that, Harbingers have been argued as being in high relation to the Traveler's Light in some way, shape, or form. They could be in some way related to the void zone that the Traveler could hang out in. There's a multitude of thoughts that can kind of exist with the Harbingers, which also plays back, of course, to how the Awoken kind of would fit into the scene as well. So that's why the Harbingers are so sickly important. If you are not familiar with what I'm talking about, check out the Taken King opening cutscene, because it's those orbs of light that Mara saw, the Queen of the Awoken summons. Those are called the Harbingers. And they say there's 7 of them. We see all 7 of them in the cutscene, but there's some other lore implications that say there might be more of them. This is why the question is, what the heck are they? So I think that's where the feedback will be kind of... it's open-ended, so a poll is going to be kind of bad on that angle, but if you guys can leave some kind of feedback, that'd be absolutely awesome, just to kind of see what you guys think.
Definitely. And if you are somebody who responds to the poll, if you retweet it, I don't have the entire community on my Twitter. I wish I did. That would be awesome. But if you retweet it, that'll get the poll out there more so we can get some more feedback on it. And that would be amazing.
Cool. All right. So be sure to sound off and let us know your thoughts on that one. Cause I'm kind of curious to see what feedback we do get on that. But we're looking forward to diving into the discussion. I know the team is here as well. So let's run through the standard intro notes and then we'll get right into it. Our topic for this week's chat is going to be a look at the worm gods. Before we jump into that, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes to run through. In our last chat, we discussed Saint 14. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out the new FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering, where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday, at around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a recap of the previous week's chat for those who are unable to participate. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found on our show notes or on our website. Podcasts focused on Destiny include Guardian Radio, the first and longest running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian One, a Destiny group dedicated to Guardians helping Guardians and discussing current Destiny news and happenings, Ghosts and Echoes, which is a collection of the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, This Guardian Life, which is a podcast from the casual Guardian's perspective that highlights all Guardians, large and small. We do also have a non-Destiny focused podcast, The Enthusiast Life, which is a podcast discussing a wide range of fun topics from within the entertainment world. Our next chat is going to be a discussion on The Reef and Awoken. Be sure to weigh in on the poll this weekend to let us know which topic you want to discuss after that. Links to that poll can be found either on Twitter at FocusFireChat or within our Discord server. I've asked Green to put together a high-level summary of tonight's topic, and this is what she had to say.
This week's summary is courtesy of Purple Chimera from IshtarCollective.net. Creatures that lived in the furthest depths of the Fundament. On the Fundament, Zavathun, one of the 3 exiled daughters of the Osmian king, heard instructions from a dead worm. Following those instructions, the sisters traveled into the depths of their world where they met the Leviathan, who warned against traveling deeper. They ignored his warnings to meet 5 creatures that called themselves the Worm Gods: Yul, Ir, Zul, Ur, and Akka. Yul described himself as being dragon-like, saying, "I am Yul, the honest worm. Behold my passage. Behold my vast displacement, my ponderous strength, my great and coiling length, my folding jaws and curled wings. Behold the hiding city symbiotic with my flesh. I am Theket, Arash. I am at the beginning and the end of lives. Behold Ur, and Zol, and Ur, and Akka, the virtuous worms. Look upon us and know that we are good." The 5 creatures said that they had been trapped in the depths of the planet for millions of years, and in that time they had summoned many species to the Fundament. The Worm Gods were aligned with a force they called the Deep, and opposed to the nature of the sky, including the Leviathan and the Traveler, who they said were agents of the sky. According to the Leviathan, the Deep claim was that existence is the struggle to exist. It seemed that while the forces of the sky promoted cooperation, the forces of the deep promoted competition. Yul proposed a bargain to the 3 sisters. If the sisters would take the worm god larvae into their bodies, then the sisters would gain incredible power, enough to retake their kingdom. In return, the sisters would have to promise never to abandon satisfying their curiosity, testing their strength, or using their cunning. The sisters accepted the bargain, leading to the birth of Aurochs, Zavathun, and Xivu Arath. When the Hive met resistance against the united forces of the Ecumen, Aurochs realized the way of the deep was to take what was needed, but the worm gods had given their larvae freely. In order to gain mastery over the deep, Aurochs would need to take that power for himself. Aurochs killed his sisters to gain strength, although they were not killed permanently. and found Akka, the Worm of Secrets. Oryx slew Akka and in the process learned how to take life and bend it to its will. He renamed himself Oryx, the Taken King. The other worm gods were pleased with Oryx's actions.
Before we jump into the information and thoughts the community had about worm gods, let's look at this week's Lost Lore. All right, so this week, what I think would be the most obvious Lost Lore topic would be the Hive Princes. I really kind of enjoyed digging into these a little bit, and I'm kind of curious on, I know Green and I had a little bit of a conversation about it, but I'm also curious about Beard and Justin's thoughts on it. We basically see these figures within Destiny 1. We haven't seen really anything significant or close to this level in Destiny 2 just yet, but this is actually, there are 4 of them that are named specifically for the Ahamkara, or not the Ahamkara, the work gods. The worm gods. Stop!
See?
I'm so confused.
It's a
slippery slope. Just like my job. Anyways, So the swarm princes that we know of are Dakur, Merak, Garak, and Banuk. And they are all identified as specific princes to the individual worm gods. Dakur is Yule, Merak is Ir, Garak is Zol, and Banuk is Now, the thing that to me stood out really quickly was there was no prince for Akka, which, going back to the Books of Sorrow, kind of that makes sense because Akka isn't really around. However, we are introduced later in Destiny 1 to another prince who is known as Urox, which is the Flame Prince, who's described as being from a long forgotten brood. And so I have a couple questions, but my first one is, do you guys think that Urox is associated with Akka, or is it just another Hive prince? Like, where do you guys think Urox? Does Urox fall within the same categorization of the Swarm Princes, or what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, the biggest thing is deciding what the title with the different worm gods names tied to them actually mean. Like, is it something different versus the Flame Prince to be Ur's Prince? I mean, we do see some Taken that have the worm gods attached to them within Destiny 2, but we don't have any Hive, if I'm remembering correctly.
I don't remember any. I do know there are some other characters or other NPC enemy characters within Destiny 1 that are identified with the worm gods names, and those are the spawn Ear spawn or Zol spawn. One of them that stands out is Mormu, who is Zol spawn, where there's a personal theory of mine with regards to Zol and his or her relationship with the Hive a little bit. It's not a good one. And Mormu kind of plays into that because Zol is continuously connected to especially ogres. It's very connected to ogres and the abominations, as is Ear as well. But yeah, and I guess that's the other question that I had about the princes is, so like chat's pointing out Sardon, which is Crota's Fist, was kind of the I guess leader of the Swarm Princes, if you would. The Swarm Princes were basically the hive that were responsible for guarding and are possibly creating the Sword of Crota. Though I don't know about the creation so much because there's conflicting information there because of the Books of Sorrow and then our Ghosts calls. So anyways, but they are responsible for guarding it. And that's actually where we encounter them in Destiny 1 is we kill them, which begs the question, are they ascendant? So are these ascendant hive, or are these hive that are not quite ascendant and so they are permanently gone? What are your thoughts on that one? Like, are we potentially going to see these princes come back?
I think that about depends on how much you want to take the recent adventure that is done on Titan into account.
The knight,
because the knight himself is actually like, we kill him and then his soul ends up hovering around till he goes to a different area, respawns, and so on. So he's hiding his death, so to speak, at that point. The question is that from a gameplay perspective, that they kind of figured, oh, we can kind of play with this a little bit more. We probably should, because it's a pretty cool little aspect to the hive and how they act. Could they just not implement that in with the swarm princes at the time, just because of knowledge? Or do we want to take it from the opposite angle, that we feel the brood on Titan is Savathun's brood? And Savathun would also, at least from what it seems like, possibly just because of the way that the knights and even the acolytes from bottom up, it just seems like her brood is a little bit more built up than what Oryx's was. She seems to be in that idea of, well, I'm going to remain powerful, but I'm going to still give my brood the means to be cunning and powerful as well, if that makes enough sense. It's just the idea basically to ensure that her survival is a guaranteed, because she has enough power behind her. She's already got enough power because of quite possibly what she knows from Kuraya, which of course gets into a whole different theory, but I am getting tangential. The thing that I mean by this is that anything that may be related with Oryx brood, be it with Crota, be it with Oryx himself, be it with the twins, they don't necessarily seem like they're in it for anybody else other than themselves, which is what we kind of know of with the Hive to begin with in Destiny 1 and throughout the Books of Sorrow. And meanwhile, seeing this knight be able to actually teleport and manage the way that it does, it kind of makes me think that they're given a little bit more influence over...
Oh, that's an interesting.
Over like what they could do. Yeah,
there's almost like right. No, I didn't even think about that too. But that's a really good point. So the entire information basis that we have for the Hive is all through Oryx's brood, right? We only really have seen 1/3 of really the Hive. We don't know how Savathun and Xivu are handling their houses. We only have seen Oryx's. And Oryx has always been kind of a fend for yourself and very hierarchical. Where I didn't even think about the potential, what would it would be a socioeconomical kind of difference in the way that they run their houses. Like, yeah, I'm going to say how they would divvy up that tithing. Yeah. Oh man, I didn't even think. So yeah, you're right. Like the swarm, which actually kind of segues into the other question I had about the princes is, are these princes unique to Crota and Oryx? But I know Green, did you have something?
I did. I just wanted to have to redirect the thought about the princes a little bit, because the princes in the bargain card from Books of Sorrows, they're referring to Oryx and technically it was Arash and Xivu and everybody as princes at this point. So
right.
Their lower staged possible could get to the higher stage later on. Do we think that the Yule and are they titles that are assigned to them, or are they actually given that from the worm gods themselves? I mean, I know they don't necessarily go into that, but
my thought on that was actually with the worm gods and the Faustian bargain that we're going to get into later, but with that whole thing, we know that basically every single larva in the hive is associated with one of these gods, right? Every single one of the hive worms can trace its lineage back to one of the worm gods. And so I actually kind of think that Green, I think that is actually a really good point. And actually, I do think that's the case. I think because we also know that within Oryx's, pyramid scheme, whatever you want to call it, multi-level marketing scheme, whatever title you want to give it, within that model, the tithing process, that is how the hive grow. Because a hive, when it's born, is a thrall, and then it can become an acolyte and become a knight, and or a wizard, or whatever the metamorphosis that it undertakes. And it goes through those changes as it becomes more powerful. It becomes more as it gets promoted from mid management to higher management. The work gods. There's a lot of jokes that I can make about that, but I'm not going to. But as they enter into the higher echelons of mid management, they could become they are, this particular faction of larva is from Ear, or this particular lineage traces its back to Yule. We see that within even on the Dreadnought, there are particular treasure chests that we could unlock that were associated with particular gods. There was, I think, actually, in that one we actually did have a key of Akka. Like, I think we had all 5 worm god keys, and each of those unlocked a specific chest that was attainable in the Dreadnought during Destiny 1. Go for it.
The only thing that I would kind of present is actually what I read in the summary. Yule is the one that they get the worms from, or at least he's the one that's speaking at that point.
I kind of took it as he was speaking for them.
Oh,
yeah, they're all there. Behold, Urzel. Yeah, they're all there. So I don't know.
He says, "Behold them; they are the virtuous worms." Or we are the virtue, whatever. But I always kind of took it as like Yule's not the only one that has larva, because again, going back to kind of like the fact that we have Mormu, Zolspawn, and then there's the princes who are kind of again associated with particular worm gods. To me, that kind of makes sense. And then you also see within let's say, and we'll get into this a little bit with the etymology of the worm gods, but like each worm god kind of seems to have almost like a sphere of power, which is very common in pantheons, but like that doesn't really, they blend well together, but they're not. Like Yule is described as the honest worm. Akka is described as, kind of the worm of secrets. Zol seems to be kind of this kind of wrathful creature, and then Ear kind of seems all about the medical and these medical experiments and all that. And so each one of the worm gods kind of has their own little thing. And then if you look, there's also kind of that division in the hive as well, because you have Mormu Zolspawn, who is responsible for the summoning pits. You have different wizards that are related to Ear, and Ear kind of seems very powerful in the hive pantheon, and we don't see a lot of it anywhere else other than Oryx uses him to threaten his sibling or his offspring quite often. And so there's a lot of interplay, I think, and it just reminds me a lot of like the Roman pantheon, and like how those different gods were used in interchangeably different positions based on the situation and the context that was being faced by the Roman citizens. But Justin, I know you had something.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to kind of, and this may or may not have any bearing here, but I think it kind of does. The actual dynamic of the difference between a swarm and a hive. If you're speaking about bees, like you might use the two terms interchangeably, but a hive is an established colony. It's an established structure, usually some sort of honeycomb, and then there's a hierarchy inside the hive, and it's a very structured place. A swarm, the best way to describe it, is a group of bees or whatever it is that's swarming, that's between homes. And bees and other similar insects will actually swarm and hold a certain area and just kind of swarm in that area and send scouts out to find a new home. So if you ever see a big group of bees somewhere just kind of hovering, that's a swarm, and they're actually sending scouts out to find the next place to put their new hive. But that's actually kind of how I think of these swarm princes. Each one embodies a different worm, and they're actually sent out into into our causal world, looking for a new place to build a colony. What do you think?
I actually like that. I think I like that. I like that parallel there. I think I also, just kind of also think that what we call the hive as a whole is actually more like what you were describing as a swarm, to be honest. I think that the definition of swarm fits the hive more than the definition of a hive, because they kind of seem to be transitory. They seem to be searching for, the final shape, whatever you want to insert there. Yeah. But I definitely like that about the swarm princes. I like that connection.
I actually think naming them the swarm princes is kind of a way of deeming them like a sort of scouting group. Like they're actually venturing out into our plane, our realm, trying to find places that that a colony could take, could actually gain purchase.
Yeah, I guess my only contention to that is if that was 100% the case, why would they be knights, not wizards?
That's a good point.
Because the wizards are more.
I could venture.
Go for it, Beard.
I could venture to possibly say that it's like kind of running with that idea, make it into like military hierarchy in a way. You've got a platoon, you have a battalion, you have a regiment. It could be something of that nature, where it's more of a breakdown that way towards military control. That would at least explain a little bit more of the ideas of. Especially with them being knights, because they are the more militaristic warring concept, if you will.
Right, and I guess the only reason I was bringing that up is because like the wizards seem to be more like the mother morph that we see mentioned in the Books of Sorrow than the knights, which is definitely more military. But
the wizards do have more of a command type role to them, whereas if you were going to send
that's true
an autonomous militaristic type unit out, it would make sense to have them be knights, because
establish a foothold and then send the wizard out after.
They do have the autonomy as knights to be able to actually like have some leeway to act, but they have the power to actually impose force, and also, it kind of makes sense, but
no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I really do, and I actually that kind of I'll try to bring it back a little bit. We kind of were talking about ascendancy, right? And Beard, I really like the explanation there about the possible difference between Savathun's court and Oryx's, distribution of power. But what is ascendancy in the world of the Hive? Like and this is kind of a question that I know a lot of us have kind of wrestled around with, is what is it that really makes the hive? What is it that makes a hive ascendant? Is there a certain part of, or is there a certain bar of power that once they achieve, they can access it? Beard, what are your thoughts on that?
Per that notion, it's at least the way I've always interpreted it, it feels more of like a means of power versus also a manipulation of like what's around them, because to manipulate a throne world, especially, seems like that takes a lot of paracausal energy in how that would all kind of conform, work out, so on. So it's understanding your own power as well as growing your own power. And there would be a certain point where by the quote unquote magics or powers of the hive, it would kind of fit in the same realm as like what we have with, say, Super, or, if you really want to go back to this, arguably how it is with Sunsinger, it would be the same kind of resurrection powers that could be kind of manipulated into it. I would say it is a mix between power and then understanding more than anything else. It's something where you had to really kind of focus it, because we needed to. I'm thinking of the best way to put it, which is why I'm kind of like dancing around the bush here a little bit. When we went in for the mission, what was it? Light Beyond, something like that, with the Crota crystal, where we grab that, and then we go to the death ceremony, because I don't want Eris to yell at me. They actually make it to the point where, we need to get a hold of his essence. Well, what would be the essence for a hive? Is it that their power? Is it their overall philosophy? Is it just their being? Is it their arguable soul? What is it? I would just go as far to say that it was just that overwhelming of a power that they had, that's what makes them into an ascendant being in some way.
Because I know when we see with like the example of the, kind of bringing this back into the worm gods, you see this a little bit with Kaharn Atoll, right? With the slaughter that was necessary for the worm gods to achieve the logic to then make geostationary orbit from Fundament.
Right.
So, and that kind of ties into the concept of, like the hive and the worms as vampiric. They literally drain the light from creatures and then use that light as a source of power. And I really actually kind of like that parallel there, because that kind of does seem very strongly implied within the Books of Sorrow. Is it is by killing those around them that they gain power, which if you are very familiar with like most of the vampire mythology, especially Eastern vampire mythology, life force is something that is actually, even within the Western vampires, the reason why Western mythology of vampire was so heavily focused on blood is because during that time that was what was assumed to be the life force, whereas in the Eastern it was more of your ki or your chi, your soul. And so that's kind of where the hive really seemed to me to be very, very, very connected to that vampiric thought process as far as achieving that power through there. So like the concept of ascendancy, though, it's like, is that something akin to as they are promoted through the ranks and they gain access to more power, then that's when they are themselves able to make their own wounds in reality to achieve the ascendant realm? I mean, excuse me. Right? Would you guys agree with that idea? Like, it's kind of like, Beard, I think I'm kind of agreeing with you on that one. It's not, but because it's not just power, and I like that. I like that explanation, because you have to understand how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's also this brief or small, or maybe it is a lot heavier than I give it credit to be, element that exists where you have to also persist with that power. Because as we know, over time, you'll start to actually have like a hive's spirit will kind of begin to wane. Their worm will, of course, start to feed on them, and they need to go ahead and recuperate their powers. A number of pieces behind that. And that's where I think that there is that element of proving yourself, of power, of making sure and obtaining that your worm is satisfied. But ultimately, it comes down to the hive being themselves to understand that knowledge and how to use it. But enough power behind their worm in order to manifest it. I kind of keep coming back to the synchronous of like Guardians and Hive, because I see a lot of parallels with us.
Right.
And granted, it's called out in games as often as it is. The same is basically true of, if you want to look at this from like the light's perspective of a ghost, where as soon as a ghost runs out of light, per that point, a guardian has no other means that they can resurrect themselves. If a worm were to run out of tithing, that may imply that they are not able to then resurrect or enter their throne worlds. That's at least my thinking behind it, if I continue the parallel.
Right, and I think that brings to me, to pull like that's a very dangerous tangent to go down, because I'm pretty sure you and I could probably have that conversation for hours. To kind of pull it back into the worm gods, so one of the biggest contention points, I guess, for a lot of people who know of the worm gods through the Books of Sorrow is the Faustian bargain, right? That bargain between the worm gods, or between Yule basically, and the sisters, or the siblings. And I guess that brings up the question too, so we know the bargain exists between the siblings, which, Oryx, Savathun, Xivu-Arath, and the Hive, the worm gods. We know what those bargains are. What about every other hive in existence? Like what is your interpretation on where do the regular hive, if you want to call them, the 99%, not the 1%ers, the 99%, where do they fall within these bargains? Because you're right. I mean, I do get the sense that their worms will consume them if they don't get their feeding of light. But are they bound by a particular bargain in the sense that the siblings are bound by it, or are they just required to feed light? Like, do they just need to channel straight light, or do they need to inherently follow this nature of themselves? Which then begs the question, what does that mean? Because does that mean that every single hive has an individual? Because going back to what Justin was talking about with the swarm princes, a hive mind begs the question: are these actual individual aspects, or are these just fragments of a singular matron, or queen bee, if you will?
Well, do we have any instances of there actually being a worm coming out of any other hive?
In game, there are times that when you're killing like an acolyte, I know for an acolyte, you can sometimes see the worm animation. Like if you get it in Destiny 1 especially, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I saw someone talking about it in Destiny 2. I haven't seen it in Destiny 2, but I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering, it's been a while since I played Destiny 1, but I think that it was in Destiny 1.
So here's the question. If they're the breeding ground for the hive, right? Are the worms introduced there? I don't remember if there's worms in like the beginning of D1, the hallways or anything like that. I only remember seeing the little grubs in the Dreadnought, which is Akka, which makes sense that they would be there because there's larvae all over Akka and all the rest of the worms. But I don't remember seeing it in other places.
Yeah, in D1, I can't remember too much.
I don't remember them
maybe
being down
like
in the moon, in the undergrounds of the moon. I don't.
Yeah, that was the only place I was thinking that they would have been, and even like around the bones or anything like that, you just don't see any of them. So I think that they are keyly placed inside of the Dreadnought for that reason. But no,
with Titan, though, they are swarming around in Titan.
Right.
Well, I gotta say they are there, and you've got the ones that fall out of knights, wizards, and acolytes when you shoot them. The only ones that don't have it seems like, are Thrall. Or if it does happen, then I've never personally seen it happen on a Thrall.
Yeah, and I think the explanation could be that it's just not a large enough worm. So because Thrall kind of they disintegrated.
It's diluted so far.
They disintegrate when you kill them.
What do you think, Justin?
I think you take a portion of the larva, and the biggest portion obviously goes in the what would you call the ascendant of the line. So, like, let's say, for example, the largest portion of the worm goes in Oryx, and then a smaller portion of the larva goes in and gets disseminated out through all of his subjects, right? Everyone gets a piece of them. It's kind of like, have you ever been in a church and, you know, they say this is the body of Christ? Or, you know, I hate
which
to
is
take it there.
But that's an apt parallel, because that's pretty much exactly what Yule says.
Yeah, I'm not comparing Catholicism to the Worm Pact, but no.
And hate mail starts.
Broken. It's broken. No, all I'm saying is, do you get that feeling when you're in that service and they say this is the body of Christ, and they hand out the small wafers that obviously are snack sized portions of Christ, and you're like, okay, it disseminates. Blue's broken. So it disseminates. So you can imagine the thrall at the low level has a very tiny portion of larva at his disposal. So his individual demand is low, but he has to account for the demand in the level above him, because the entity directly above him, his larva demands what it demands, and that entity has to account for the demand of its larva, which is significantly greater than. Do you see? It's exponential. It moves level to level above, so it does extend all the way to the lowest thrall, but it's diluted. By the time you get to the lowest thrall, the individual demand of the larva at the lowest thrall level is, it's microscopic when compared to the demand of the worm larva at the oryx level. Like, that larva is, it needs to be fed.
Well, right, and that's why we had the Court of Oryx, right? Which is Oryx's response to because they got to a point where they were basically eating worlds, and that was still not enough light for their worms, and so Oryx basically made the pyramid scheme that he has in order to sate his worms' hunger. Because the thing is just as with most, again, going back to the vampire mythology, just as with most of those, that mythological, archetype, as they sate the hunger, they become hungrier. It's a pretty popular trope called the horror hunger, which is kind of where, as they sate their you see this a lot. I'm trying to put words into this, you see this a lot with like lycanthropy, right? Especially characters who have been forced into lycanthropy, who are fighting this inner battle of this bloodlust, is a very popular trope. And it's just as they sate the hunger becomes sharper. And it's a never ending cycle of this like need to consume, which is exactly what the worms are, which goes to, Green's summary presentation, where Orcs realizes that the nature of the sword logic that the worm gods propose is that they take, they don't give. So when they were given the larva, they were kind of entered into the second tier citizenship with the regards to, their power structure, which when Oryx then takes the power to commune with the deep, and then through that power learns how to take himself, or to take himself, there's a comma there. It's very hard to do that audibly. That is where Oryx kind of transcends into that next level of power, is because he has shown his capability to exert himself upon reality and to take his own place. But I think also, Justin, just to clarify with regards to your your comment about like the dissemination of the larva, I think the thing though that I want to make clear is that every hive does have its own worm. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that I'm pretty sure that's kind of how I've always seen it. But I think the hunger of those particular worms differ based on the hierarchical positioning of that hive.
I've kind of come to reevaluate this. Does every hive have its own unique instance of a worm? I don't think so.
I think so.
I actually have grown to believe that every hive is more. It's more of like almost like chopping segments off an earthworm. If I chop the end off an earthworm, it can survive. Like it can grow. Like there are organisms that when severed can actually grow into a completely different organism.
Yeah,
and I think that's what I think that's what we're seeing.
Oryx's daughters did that.
I think that's what we're seeing, and in the sense of, is it a full-fledged worm? Sure, it sure is. But to say that it is a unique thing from an originator's standpoint, no. I think they probably all are chopped off the end of the originals.
And here's the reason why I disagree. Because when you see the initial start of the Crusade of the Hive, and I mean I use the word crusade, the war that the Hive enact upon Fundament was a holy war. Like they were converting people to their cause, and they were not in it. I mean, they were physically converting them. They were introducing the larva of the hive of the worm gods to the peoples of Fundament. They took those larvae and they physically gave them homes within the inhabitants of Fundament, to the point where that was part of the bargain, was that they would find hosts for this this really weird symbiotic relationship with the worm gods. It's more of, and we kind of talked about this in like way back when we first started with Bife on the Ahamkara and worm gods episode. But it's a very similar symbiotic relationship that's known as endosymbiosis, because it's almost a mutual thing, but like basically endosymbiosis is a symbiotic relationship in which one organism lives within the body or the cells of another. So it's generally it's an obligate relationship, which basically translates into the organisms cannot live without each other, but it's not always. So, which kind of begs the question of what exactly this symbiotic relationship with the worm is. But the worm gods themselves, like, I don't think the worm gods are inside the siblings by any means, but I think that their offspring, their spawn, literally is inside of the hive. Right? I mean, I'm not saying that Yule is inside Oryx. Like, that to me is silly. But I think that a offspring or a spawn of Yule or of whatever is inside Oryx. Oryx's worm is the offspring of one of the worm gods. Right? Do you agree with that, Justin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. And I would even expand on that and say that it's actually parasitic endosymbiosis. So
yeah,
it's not only one. It's actually not only one organism living within another organism. It's actually there's a parasitic paradigm there as well, of where one organism actually is actually drawing its sustenance from the other.
Right, and you see, there
are instances where endosymbiosis can exist, where one organism does not harm the other or drain resources from the other.
Yeah, endosymbiosis is often like, I mean, so a symbiotic relationship does not necessarily translate into a parasitic relationship.
Exactly.
This was a debate that we had way back then as well. It's like the symbiotic relationship is simply meaning that one or both parties is contingent on the other party, like in so far as they are joined. So an endosymbiosis symbiotic relationship is simply a symbiotic relationship in which one of the parties is literally inside, which is the endo, inside the other. And generally, it is a relationship in which they both require the other. You see this, a symbiotic relationship is like, what was the one? Gosh, man, it's been so long. It's like clownfish and sea anemones, right? That's a symbiotic relationship. It's not an endosymbiotic, but it is a symbiotic relationship. Neither one is necessarily harming the other, but together they actually make a stronger pairing and they actually survive. You see that with, I mean, there's tons of examples of symbiotic relationships. But like the parasitic nature of the relationship, we see that a lot. Even so, within the grimoire, we see that within Calcified Fragment 24, which is the Scream. And that's where you also see the ever sharpening hunger of the worms, but that's also where Oryx refers to worms plural, not singular. So, and I see chat's actually asking this right now too. It's like, so for the hive siblings, do they just have one worm, or do they have 5, one from each of the worm gods?
Ooh.
Like, do they have multiple parasites within them?
And if
I
don't,
don't think so.
But if they don't,
if they only have a singular, I mean, the worms, they each kind of have their own, I guess, thing is not the best and most descriptive way of saying it.
A sphere of influence.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, do the specific worm larvae dictate a specific way that they behave, or can manipulate whatever's around them? I mean, is there an actual influence granted by the larvae to the host besides the initial growth aspect and able to consume light?
Yeah, and the reason, and so like to go back to the plural question, the Book of Sorrows 24, the Calcified Fragment, I'm thinking that it is a singular worm, because Oryx says, my worm's hunger grows faster than the might I draw from it. But then he says, but as we do this, my siblings, we feed our worms. And the more we feed them, the hungrier they grow faster and faster.
I still think that's in relation to their own worm,
right?
And the
so there's
sense of the
right, and that's kind of what I was thinking as well. As he's talking about the 3 worms within the 3 siblings, because when he's talking about his worm, he's speaking in singular, but then he also refers to worm our god, not the worms our god. So it begs the question there as well.
Could we tie that back to what I was speaking on earlier, where the different broods end up allowing for the different levels of tithing and how that would all kind of permeate together? It would allow for a separate amount of growth to be done between the broods, basically.
Mm-hmm. So
that's the only other thing.
Would you think like each sibling would have a different?
I would think
host?
that each worm would kind of have like a similar worm parasite that it could then carry down to the rest of the hive. Yeah. What they would be the question, of course, at that point, which also begs the question. There are 5 worm gods at that point then, with 3 sisters.
Yeah. Who drew the short straws on?
Exactly. And who isn't necessarily becoming, that much more powerful then, or are they managing that from afar in a distant area? Because as we kind of know, the worm gods are just an agent of the dark or of the deep more than they are of it. So that's
and then also going back. Yeah, going back to the tithing process too, Oryx is just tithing to them. He's not technically tithing to his worm god. In the same factor that Oryx can have multiple instances tithing to him, so it's a many to one relationship. I can see them just being like, oh, here's a pool of light, basically, and then the worm gods themselves are partitioning out from that pool. So many tangents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only one that could probably answer us that one would be a certain warlock that's lost among the tithing network.
Speaking of that,
oh god.
Speaking of him, I know he's Beard's favorite to talk about, but has anybody noticed in that same adventure that we were talking about earlier with the knight, how the knight soul, if that's what we're going to call it, looks an awful lot like the different little light ball that we had in the Kingsfall raid that everyone thinks is Toland?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it looks extremely similar. I don't know if I would call that any relation towards Toland, at least personally, but
I call it noob bait. Go follow the light. Go follow the light, guys.
Yeah.
Thunk.
The Hive or anglerfish.
I don't know. Pins loves that encounter room. There he is in chat.
I'm going to say you always can look underneath the ocean, Crow people, and find some of the absolute worst kind
star.
of ecology.
Like a bait star.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, okay. So going back to the shattered one. I mean, that kind of also gives us one of our first introductions to the names of the worm gods. Is within Toland's kind of ramblings, I guess, within the Ghost Fragments. And so that in and of itself also kind of introduces us into what is always a fun delve in chat, is kind of the etymology of the names of the different worm gods. And they're all over the place. Let's just be honest. Like, they are all over the place.
This is the Blues Yule log version.
Jeez, God, man, that was. Oh my gosh, yeah. That connection's still there because Yule is a disambiguation of Yule, like in the Yule log. Yule is also the Buddha or Chinese term for object. So, like, you see that a lot in Buddhism. Literally, YUL means object, or apparently it also means sense field or sensum. So take that for what you will. Is a prefix in German that means proto. So basically what you see this a lot in is like when you're talking about like grandfathers, or it's the proto blank. It's also a Sumerian city in biblical times. So, that's a little bit of a large disparate connection there. Ir is the one that actually makes the most sense to me, to be completely honest. Ir is Old Norse for mercy or help, but it's also a goddess or a Valkyrie figure that is very closely associated with medical skills. And the reason why this makes a lot of sense to me is Ir is often, when we read in the Books of Sorrow, Ir is often associated with medically the medical abominations. So Golgoroth, that is, it's also certain. We'll get to Zol's connection there as well, but Ir is the one that kind of is responsible for some of those beneficial medical procedures within the abominations that are controlled by the Hive. Which brings us to Zol. Zol is I think it's pronounced Wolof, but it's an African language. It's Wolof for heart, but it's also Uzbekistan for speckled, which I don't really know if that signifies anything. But Zol is also connected to the ogres in the sense that Zol is the one that actually sent Golgoroth to eat the Hive. So there's apparently a bit of animosity between Zol and the Hive, or at least Oryx, because Zol was actually the one that was responsible for Golgoroth being sent to eat the Hive. Zol is also kind of connected to the summoning pits, which is where we see a lot of the abominations, like, well, it used to be Fogoth, but now it's just an unnamed ogre. But where that particular strike, that was Zol's kind of domain. And the reason why we kind of get that sense is because that's where we encounter Mormu, which is the spawn of Zol. And Mormu is kind of the one that was seemingly in charge of that entire project, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then finally we had Akka. Akka is Finnish for hag. It's also, interestingly enough, an alternative spelling of Aker, or Acre, which is also seen as Akko, which is the city in the Middle Eastern region. If you've played Assassin's Creed, you know this city. If you know anything about medieval history, you probably have heard of this city. It's a pretty old city. I mean, pretty much the only connection between all five of these is that they're indicative of something ancient. They're indicative of something that's very old.
Yeah, but we're forgetting the most important one. Cthulhu,
one?
obviously.
Oh gosh!
I was like, wait, what?
I was like, I'm going through that in my head. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I got them all, Beard. And it's.
No, he's on Titan. We'll find him later.
Yeah.
Really.
You want to talk about eldritch abominations, right? I mean, that's again going into tropes here. That's one that definitely is prevalent here, is the Lovecraftian, horrors of the unknown and the mythological unexplained. Yeah, Cthulhu would probably be a stepsister or step-sibling to one of these worm gods. The cousin.
I'm going to say just the fact that,
far distant cousin.
Yeah. I'm going to say what Vero had said, all of them just relate to, like most of their names being more like a relation to old or old something. And of course, Cthulhu is even, within video games or elsewhere is pretty well related as like an old god.
Well, yeah, except
so
Cthulhu is not even actually the old god.
Perfectly.
Cthulhu is the gatekeeper to the old gods. Like Cthulhu himself or itself is not even. That's not even the one that you need to worry about. God, now I'm thinking of House on Horror, or what is it? The Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods.
All I can hear is
now that's all I can think of. Thank you for that beer.
You're welcome.
It's not a bad thing. I'm gonna have to go
Sigourney
watch that
Weaver,
movie now. Yeah. Oh God.
Just have Sigourney Weaver pop up. That was her best worst role ever.
Oh man!
Wow, I felt like that was a Justin compliment. Cutting.
That was.
I feel like that's one of those where you're like, thanks, but really?
I'm trying to think. I think the other thing, while I'm talking about tropes, Green had to deal with me looking up tropes for the Hive.
Oh my God.
It was so fun. It was so fun. It was so much fun.
Many.
So I'll be honest, I didn't know that this was actually like there was an actual term for this trope. But the orange blue or the blue and orange morality. And of course Green's over here going, yeah, this is I didn't know there was a term for it.
Okay, so I used to listen to Major Spoilers podcast, and Matthew, who's one of the co-hosts on that, loves talking about tropes. So he would go over all the tropes on a fairly regular basis. So I'm not super well versed, but I've at least heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but yes.
Yeah. So like the blue and orange morality is basically, I mean, I was reading this thing and, it's like the best example of the Hive in general. So basically it's a trope that says like it's a description of a character that is within a moral framework that is so utterly alien and foreign to human experience that we literally can't peg them as good or evil. Like they aren't. It's just. There is no way for us to understand them, and you see this really a lot in the books.
So they are the 9.
Well, no, even further removed. Like you see this a lot in the Books of Sorrow, and I think Seth did a really good job in writing the Books of Sorrow as this, because it's kind of a trope that basically states that there may be a logic behind their actions. It's just that they operate within such an entirely different set of value and premises from which to draw their conclusions that we literally have no common ground in which to connect to them. We can't empathize with them. So it's like usually what you see a lot of times is that we will find what they do as appalling, but they also find us appalling and really weird, or it's a very common, it's just like completely lost in translation. And then so it goes on to kind of explain that like although they are often likely to commit acts we would see as horrific, sometimes there's just random things that they do that just don't make any sense, which again really explains the Hive. But like either way, they're like this is just what they do. They and this kind of can be seen within the Hive's presentation of love as killing. They love each other, so they kill each other. To a human mind, that is the antithesis of what it is to feel compassion and feel love or brotherly love or any type of love towards something. You don't want to do them harm. Whereas in the Hive paradigm, it's exactly the opposite. You do them harm because by doing them harm in their world, it strengthens them and it makes them a better individual and further develops them in the logic of the sword. But for humanity, we don't have that. We don't have that history and that ascendancy that ability to cheat death, basically to sidestep death. So for our paradigm, love is protecting a person, which the Hive see as that's kind of the exact opposite of what you should be doing, because in the Hive mentality, if you're protecting someone, you're actually weakening them, right? So yeah, it's just like I was reading this blue and orange morality trope, and I was just like, this is the Hive. Like this is the Hive's base worldview is explained right here. But and then there were a couple other ones. There was the reality warper is another really common trope that you see a lot in the Worm Gods. You also had the horror. We kind of mentioned the horror hunger. Eldritch Abomination is again the Cthulhu reference, and then the Corruptor is really another one that kind of really is strong with the Worm Gods in particular. Cough cough, Faustian bargain. And the playing of the Hive siblings like a fiddle. But yeah, so those are the tropes that I have off the top of my head for them. And that's that's pretty much the presentation of the Worm Gods that I have.
I mean, I was trying to figure out when we started talking about Metal Gear, they were talking about playing them like a damn fiddle.
Yeah. God, man.
I didn't get that one.
I feel so sorry. And like, it's one of those things is like with the Hive, like they are one of the most beautifully constructed tragic characters in like, to be honest, like the Books of Sorrow was, in my opinion, one of the best pieces of lore within Destiny, because it absolutely humanized everything that the Hive did, and it brought it down into like this understanding, or it brought it down to a level which makes understanding like the consequence of their actions is still reverberating through time, but it's also because of things that, like the entire reason that the Hive even exists is because Tau decided that she was going to, she thought that she knew best, and she tried to stab everyone in the back and failed miserably. She rolled a critical fail.
So here's my question now.
Here we go. Here we go.
Yep, it's time to speculate.
Hit it.
Do we think the Hive gods or the Worm Gods have an influence in D2 beyond the obvious Savathun? Do we think they're influencing other things?
Ooh.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say no, personally. Only because, per the moment, the ones that we could... the larger worms and everything like that we at least possibly know about. We knew of the ones that were on the moon. They appear to be dead. So there's at least that piece. I just feel like the Hive overall are the ones that act out that what the Worm Gods ultimately are there for. And at least on a personal level, I don't think that they are necessarily engaging themselves onto anything that we're doing. Again, I think that they're having the Hive kind of take care of a lot of that for it. I think realistically, at least in my mind, from how I'm putting it all together, the brood that we see on Titan, if it is Savathun's brood, which do we say that that's like confirmed? Because I don't know if it's necessarily confirmed, but it's like 90%.
Well,
I don't know if it's
in a few of them.
confirmed.
It's said in the mission, isn't it? And we have different, I would say, minions of Savathun.
Yeah, I'm gonna say between that and the Taken forces as well, where they have so many things that talk about Savathun besides. It makes me think highly that they are.
So it's likely that it is
that's what I'm saying. It's like 90% there, I think. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's where they're putting it. Anyway, what I mean by that is I think that overall, yeah, the worm gods have to basically act through something else. Which, don't get me started on the ecology of Titan then, but let's carry on.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any other speculations about the worm gods?
Chad had one.
Yeah.
Do you believe when Oryx killed Akka that his worm consumed Akka instead?
Oh. So that kind of leads me to my next question.
So to be really quick though, no, I don't think so. Because he made a ship out of Akka. But yes,
True.
Green, go. Sorry, Green, go.
We assume right now that the tithing line ends with whoever's at the top, quote unquote, in the hive. Does it go to the worm gods?
Wait, what? Back up, say that again.
The tithing line. So right now, like Oryx was the top of the tithing pyramid, quote unquote.
Well, right.
But does it actually go to his worm beyond him because he has to satiate his worm?
Yeah, I think that goes back in line with, the question of 3 siblings, five gods. I think that just as they tithe to Oryx and the siblings are responsible for tithing to the worm gods.
We're going to fight the worm gods at some point, and they're super overpowered because of the tithing line, because they're getting all of the hive to them.
I mean, once we team up with Nokris and imbibe the power of the Formless One, sure, let's do it. There, I broke Beard. I'm done.
That's my job.
I didn't know we were going dankest memes, but okay.
Stepping on people's rolls, Blues guy.
Jeepers. I'm gonna say I think that in a way almost ties into like a question that I've always had that of course I've entertained several times. But I think Chad had brought it up at one point or another, which is what kind of reminded me of this. So we know that bones have a very deep significance when it comes to destiny. We see that Toland had fashioned bad juju to utilize the skull of a vulture for one reason or another. We still don't necessarily know about that. We know that the stag is, especially from the recent lore tab, legitimately sounds like it is a stag, and it is the skull of a stag.
Very shamanistic.
Yeah, I'm going to say we start talking like animal spirits at that point, which is funny enough, but we were all kind of looking at going, no, don't put that in the game. And I'm still looking at that going, can we not talk about that? Because that goes into a whole different level of spirit handling. But for, how bones end up managing how important the bones of, say, we know what influence they may or may not have had with Rizilla's ear turning into Dredgen Yor, but we are able to pull a few pieces from that. We also know how the Ahamkara bones kind of handle. Where I lead back to with all of this is, do we think that in one way or another, even if it is just like a juvenile worm too, like the ones we see on the moon, do they have any additional power that could influence those that are attached to them in some way?
Oh man. I mean, that's something we haven't even really said anything about tonight, is the "Oh, bearer mine" comment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been trying to keep the Ahamkara out of this because, yes, you'll have me on a 20-hour tangent with that
Right.
one alone.
Well, yeah, I'll be right alongside you on that one.
Right.
Yeah,
But
I can
that's
see
where
you and
you're
I
kind
will
of
just be
leading
fighting
to.
there.
I mean, you're kind of leading to that in that line of thought.
Well, I definitely see where, that could be. The Ahamkara are a major piece in showcasing what bones effectively mean within Destiny's universe as a whole. Being able to kind of speak to what the wielder has and everything like that. But it's at least not the only time where I guess we see it happen. Again, I would call to the stag. Again, I would call towards bad juju because it seems like it's a partial smart weapon, or a weapons of sorrow that would follow the same bill. We, as far as I know, however, haven't seen anything that's been like 100% related to the worm gods as being like strapped to a weapon or piece of armor or something like that. So that's why I think it's a slight open discussion. If nothing else, if you do want to take it from the Ahamkara side, then I think it a short yes. But it's, do the powers change that much or alter in any way, I guess.
I'm still trying to fight the urge to go down the Ahamkara road.
All right, we can skip it because Lord knows that we are going to be
we will be here for the next 3 days.
Yes,
Ahamkara encourages you.
Oh gosh.
Please no.
Carla
also
encourages you.
podcast host ours.
We should do an episode just devoted to what we know about the Ahamkara, and just, I know we've done it before, but I think we should do it again just to update a little bit, even though there hasn't
because
been
I mean we actually do have a few new little tidbits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's going on the poll.
One that could possibly break the fourth wall, but does it?
I love that car.
Yeah,
I love that one.
I hated it initially. I read it like 5 more times, and I was like, I think I get it.
Oh my gosh. Born isn't that one of the ones that Born read on the video?
That's exactly where that entire thing had sprung up, because the very brief story behind that
amazing presentation of that card was oh my gosh, that gave me a whole new level of respect for that particular card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that argument between her and I was, if you want to talk about an argument that lasted a couple days, that's one of them that did.
And yeah, that was the dire Ahamkara skull, I believe, if I remember.
Skull, absolutely proper. Yep.
The entry,
proper,
the lore entry is Skull of Dire Ahamkara for those who want to know what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Just oh my gosh!
Player mind.
Oh, player mind.
What
type of talking
weird
skull would address its host that way?
Yeah, for the weird folk who want to know what they're talking about.
It's just so funny. Like the entire thing is just, oh my gosh, it's so great.
I'm gonna say there's other cards that showcase it, but between that and which again kind of showcases this difference. Now I'm questioning what Graviton Forfeit is made out of.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So it all ties to this discussion, honestly, with like the worm gods were the ones that kind of started us down this whole line of like symbiotic relationships and how a being can otherwise affect another. But then we see that they're not alone in how this handles. So seeing new things that kind of filter off of that same topic with Graviton Forfeit Skull of Dire Ahamkara or any Ahamkara item. Even the knuckles of Ao from Age of Triumph have little quips behind them. Besides, all of these, the stag, the vulture's head on bad juju, to call those out again. All of these kind of tie back to this idea that the worm gods' overall presence in how they carry themselves is far from finite in the universe of what Destiny has put themselves together on. I almost kind of wonder how much the Leviathan of Callus could be argued as having some kind of strange effect on him, but
oh yeah, especially if that connection.
I'm gonna say that's a whole nother level of spin foil right there.
Yeah, and real quick, a lot of people are pointing out, the other connection between the worm gods and the Ahamkara is kind of the physical description that we get from Yule, which is, the vast displacement of great and coiling length with folded jaws and curled wings. It's not necessarily a dragon, though it could be like an Eastern variation. I know Justin has a whole theory on Chinese dragons if you guys really want to hear it. But they are massive creatures that are described as being fecund, which is basically fecund is interesting because everyone kind of associates the worm gods with like this death and destruction and all this. Fecund actually means producing or capable of producing an abundance of offspring or new growth and being fertile. So that's a little bit of an odd little connection or an odd little juxtaposition there. Though someone in the chat actually, Green, you might have been, do you remember who it was that made this? But someone pointed out, they're like, I read that as being all the larvae crawling on him. And I was like, I had never even, like, that had never crossed my, and as soon as they said that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Like, that does make a lot more sense.
I don't remember who it was in chat. Oh
my gosh. Up until that point, I had always pictured them as like the Shadow of the Colossus figures with like the structures on them that you have to like, crawl through and stab them in the magic weak spot. That's how we're going to fight the worm gods. We're going to go Shadow of the Colossus on them. That just reminds me of the Penny Arcade comic. Did you hear about Steve? No.
Oh yeah, I remember.
No. Okay. I was like, I know it's an older one, but
I had to think about it.
I was like,
I had to think about it for a second.
Some little guy crawled up on him and stabbed him in the magical weak spot. I've been telling you for years, these things are a liability.
Right.
That was a very filtered version of the comic. If you want to see the original, just go search Penny Arcade Shadow of the Colossus. It's well worth the Googling. Let's see. Going back to bones real quick. Beard. We also see that in Ghost Fragment Ocean of Storms 2. Which is where we kind of have the worms with bones and scales, and also the facehugger room. Right. Which I totally am still 100% sold that is xenomorphs being born.
So what was that? What? Wait a minute.
The end.
We are the Hive, maybe.
Yeah. No, the end of Ocean Storms 2 is totally the astronaut or the lunar colonists stumbling on a xenomorph birthing chamber. That's exactly what it is. Yep. Death white egg cases of nightmares yet to come. Yeah. That's gonna hug your face, and you're gonna have a chest bopper. Like, that's just what's gonna happen. And I'm sorry. There was an argument. I haven't heard this particular argument in a while, but I remember when we were doing the original Ahamkara and Worm God episode, there was an argument that was being made that the creatures in the Ocean of Storms 2 card were actually not worms at all, but something else entirely that the Hive was using to burrow into the moons that they used for ships.
Right.
I still don't know really where I stand on that argument. Because I can kind of see it. I mean, like, I can kind of see the argument, but I haven't gotten any new information. So I don't really.
I mean, that depends on how far you want to take how the, if you will, insides of Akka look with the Dreadnought.
Right.
Was it all like that, or was there something that had burrowed? And then my argument to that would be, well, the hive and the worms grow at different rates. Is there such thing as like a juvenile worm? So that opens up a whole different can of worms. I really wanted to avoid that one, but I had to say
that, and I'm also going to get in trouble for this one too, because all that reminds me of is worms burrowing through things is the Lagokos from Halo. Because the Lagoko worms, that's what they do. They burrow through stuff, and that's actually one of the reasons they get in trouble, because they keep trying to eat the Forerunner artifacts, and the prophets are like, "No, you can't do that. Those are not food." So,
I'm also having a Wrath of Khan moment here with the brain slugs. But that's okay.
God, yes. Let's see, what other connections did we have way back? I did have the community there. Oh man, yeah, this one was a fun one. So the connection between the worm gods, the Faustian bargain, it was kind of like they were kind of the worm gods were the kind of the origin of the title of prince for the siblings, right? Is that correct? Did we see any reference to like the osmium court or the helium court as princes before the worm gods were included in the conversation? I don't think we did. But anyways, there was like an argument back when we were talking about like some of the bargaining of the Books of Sorrow. There's the argument that the worm parasite is akin to like a demonic possession. You get a lot of themes of pride, egocentricism, of falling, darkness, the formless one, like the parasitic endo-symbiotic relationship that Justin and I had talked about a little bit. There still, I have not yet still found any one-to-one relations or connections between worms and any demonology grimoires that I know of. But there are some interesting connections historically, kind of slight connections. There was a classification of demons in around the 1600s, roughly 1613, which is known as the Myclaeus classifications. You see the word Leviathan kind of used here, and Leviathan was actually described as a prince of the Seraphim, which, kind of talking demonology, you also have to talk about what's called angelology. And the Seraphim is a higher order of angelic hosts that included Lucifer, who most will recognize as the figure of Satan, who tempted people to give into heresy and was actually opposed in this classification by St. Peter. Later on, you have another classification by Binsfield that basically presents the Leviathan as the prince of the sin of envy. This was where we kind of start getting the idea of 7 princes, one for each of the deadly sins in this classification. This was actually before Myclaeus. This was in 1589. And then real quick for Leviathan, there was another reference of Leviathan so Leviathan has always been actually one of the darker aspects. It's never been a figure of good. Book of Abramelin, Leviathan is one of the 4 princes of the demonarchies. In 1818, you see a reference of Leviathan as the Grand Admiral, Knight of the Fly, which is a really kind of interesting title, in the Dictionary Infernal. And that was actually it was a parallel based off the European courts at the time. So that's where we get a presentation of demonarchies that were very fiefdom-like, and there was a number of courts which basically were comprised within those different hierarchies. And it was also a sociopolitical commentary, much like Dante's Inferno. So that was a very popular way of critiquing your opponents or allies within the the context of the world at that time. But that was kind of the connections that we had, that I had always kind of been seeing. And that was really just in Leviathan. You know, the other ones are pretty, they're, like I said, there was no really one-to-one relation between those that I could find off the top of my head. I'm trying to see. I'm pretty sure that's pretty much it as far as my notes go. I mean, like I can go into demonology a bit further, but I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. It gets dark really fast, which is not like, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone,
that's
but
not shocking.
Yeah, it's not at all. But like, I mean, like you start diving into theistic Satanism and stuff like that for regards to like the Faustian bargains and the princes of the. Yeah, I mean, there are some connections in the terminology used here. But I'm going to try to keep the podcast PG. Let's just put it that way. And we're not going to go down that particular rabbit hole of connections. But yeah, so yeah, I think that is, for me, that's the notes that I have.
I just thought of the thing I was thinking of. What's because I'm stupid and I just closed the notes. It was Urbok's Flame Prince.
Yeah, Urok's Flame Prince, right.
Urok's Flame Prince. Okay. So the others deal with the main worms, the other swarm princes, but this one is very different, of course, with the name that it has. I at least wanted to call to attention the fact that it's called the Flame Prince.
Right.
This is really out of character. Just for the fact that when you start to think of flame, you also start to think of soul, or at least solar energy. You also tend to think of, and even as it's been related to fire in general, of course, because, you know, flame, fire, so on. All of that has actually been related back to like what had basically started all of life amongst the universe. Like fire is the thing that basically started most everything, allowed for oxygen, helium, so on, whatever, to combine, fuse, go through fusion, and then you have the formation of the planets and so on. And then you have humans, and then you have other life on the planet of Earth, and then whatever else within the universe. But fire is always at the very peak of it. It's also not the thing I would associate with the Hive. So I'm wondering why that name in particular is used for him, if there is any reasoning whatsoever other than, you know, are they doing research into it? Because we know that they are. Is there something else that's going on with it? I don't know. I'm at a loss when I see that. And considering Savathun's song with the work with Hive, with the Void Light and everything, that's where I'm wondering if it's not like a research project of some kind. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only thing that I know is from the grimoire itself. It says Urox calls out to all wielders of the light to burn away all they are until only the darkness remains.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you know, the absolute conflagration of something, like the same thing as like a fire break, right? Which, yes, a fire break is a real thing, and it's when you burn something down so that nothing can burn on it because it's already been burned, and it's just darkness. But yeah, no, actually, now that you make the point of Savathun's song, that is a really interesting, because if you look at Urox, at least the Grimoire card, he actually does look like he has solar crystalline structures embedded in him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird just to at least have that kind of tie back with him, because the Hive are fairly specific in like how they want to take things and how they speak on certain forces. Like there's flame, and then there's dark flame and a few other things that kind of pass back behind it. Like you've got the hated, you've got Alakul the Darkbringer. Like all of these things are fairly named and aptly named for reasons. And when you end up getting the flame, the flame prince, it just doesn't line up to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was going to say also that would explain from a lore perspective his uncanny control over solar light.
Mm-hmm.
Like if he's been imbued with, I don't. Yeah, that's a really interesting connection.
I'm just wondering. But Urzak, I want to call him Urzak, and it's not right. Urox, his allegiance though was towards Oryx, correct?
No, his allegiance was Prince to none. Urox kept watch over a long forgotten brood long ago, which is kind of where I was like, is he connected to Titan? Is he connected to Akka? Like, what is this connection? Because it goes on to say that with the remnants of that spawn at his side, Urox calls to all wielders of the light. So I mean, like he's gotten, and that he was one of the ones that would beg the question of is he a prisoner, or is he in the prison of elders because he wants to be there?
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna say he could try to take over the whole thing.
Yeah, he was what was the Vex? The other one was the Vex, the Gate Lord that was kind of like, yeah, I like this place. I'm just gonna stay here. Like it was.
It's not Quadron, is it?
Yeah, no, I don't think it was.
I forget now.
But it was like the card itself was like, yeah, we're not really we're not really sure if it's a prisoner or if it's just like, this is my home now. I just like it here. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, I like that connection. Green, do you have any final questions to stump us with?
Not this time. Not this time. The worm gods are, without just being utterly speculative, it's hard to get into the worm gods and have any stump questions.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, well, and yeah, pretty much any question about the worm gods if you don't allow speculation in the answer is it's gonna stump you.
I'm gonna say what we have is so, in a way, limited to our knowledge, basically, of like what the Hive have told us about them, and even then, accepting of what the books of sorrow effectively tell us about them, with some extra flavor text intermingled, is not exactly the most revealing things just yet. Mm-hmm. It tells us enough, but it still just doesn't go far enough, I guess. Well,
and the other thing is, this was kind of a point of contention for a lot of people online these past couple weeks, but the revelation. I
wasn't going to bring it up.
I know, but I think it's an apt point to bring it up. It's an apt part of this is the revelation that Grimoire and the lore information that we have from game is all from in-game perspective. Which, I mean, we've had this conversation quite a bit on our between our team. I know I've had it with the Ishtar team. I'm sure you guys have had it with your guys's, your friends and all that. I mean, that's not a huge surprise, but it was I think a shock for some people to get that officially acknowledged. I don't know. But I mean, go for it.
It's the idea of are the things in Grimoire or in the story that we know, are they given to us by an outside observer, or are they given to us by characters in the game? Because if it's an outside observer, they can be completely like able to say for 100% that this is what it is. This is what I've seen out of all of it. But if it's somebody in game, which I think is more realistic as far as storytelling goes,
I love it.
You're gonna get inconsistencies. One, because no one can remember an event absolutely as it is. There's reasons why people in like the police force, detectives and stuff like that get collaborations, because you have to put together all the different pieces to get the story. And I think that this is exactly that. We're able to see more of a story because we have all the different perspectives, and not every single perspective is going to be 100% correct. It's more realistic.
Well, and in that regard, as much as a lot of people still don't necessarily like me for it, I had this video back in May talking about this guy with a mask, and everybody just thought that he was really this really cool guy that spoke a bunch of truths, and it turned out he was nothing but, not really a truth teller. I have other colorful words for him.
See our next Spinfoil episode, because we're going to go in depth on it.
But yeah, I immediately called that up from when like the folklore aspect had been brought to fruition, because everybody was like, well, the speaker was this guy that ended up telling us all this stuff. And I was like, the speaker told you nothing. And every single other idea that the speaker had was apparently perpetuated by other philosophers within the tower. And we are now being told that stuff to us through other means. So the whole concept of things being folklore, being told from a different voice, this, that, the other thing, I got that so long ago, just from like starting to read some stuff over with the speaker. And I still cannot like embrace the Books of Sorrow as 100% fact, considering the, one of the end lines is these books are full of lies.
The spray paint on the wall.
There's just so many different things that I've been able to kind of look over and say, this and Kex, I think, did such a good job with like the hierarchy, if you will, of like where Captain Kex, if you guys are familiar with like the hierarchy of like how to establish lore. But the biggest thing is just like there's established, there's like almost proven truth ideas, so on. And then there is, going into like almost absolute truth. I can't remember it word for word, but he has just this really good hierarchy of how lore fits into it. And I think it's like absolutely wonderful. Speculation, possible, probable, likely, and confirmed. There we go. That's the whole hierarchy that way. So if you get up the gumption to do so, since of course we've got the databases that you can, now I almost feel like, and this is actually going to be, spoilers, the topic of a video coming up, because I feel like this conversation needs to be talked about a little bit more. We need to now kind of go through this in a different light, the grimoire in a different light, only because now that we have this base confirmation, those that may have not gotten, well, how do I interpret this? How do I take care of it this way? Not all of it is folklore, but to get that idea that like everything has this grounding in some possible like untruth. Yeah, it's like any kind of record that's like any kind of a spoken idea, something like that. There's whisper down the lane, and then there's a text log that legitimately reports everything to you. And you can argue till you're blue in the face that maybe some stuff is, has been tampered with or anything like that. I wouldn't personally go that far. Like, I think the text logs are okay, but the the base ideas on like some of the stuff that's out there, yeah, we got to question it, and we should have been
the
questioning
audio
it.
recordings, even like the ghost recordings.
Right.
Those are all from a perspective of what the ghost is seeing. You're not getting everything behind it.
Right. And even then, I would still say that they're like, likely, if we're going by Kex's ideas, they're highly likely versus like a full confirmed. And the same ended up happening too. And I'll pull my favorite one here when it comes to the speaker is when Ghost ends up feeling that the speaker is right about all light being interconnected. And Ikora is the one that ends up telling us that, well, Olam Tan's theory of light being interconnected, I guess, is right. And I was just like, so now I'm getting shown two different sides of this coin, and it needs to basically figure some way to work itself out. I am rambling on about this, but
and I like just real quick to kind of tie it off for you is the thing with Kex's chart is that and if anyone wants that, I have it typed up. Kex has it typed up. Obviously, it's to be a little bit transparent, that's Kex's job is to do this for actual law enforcement. So he actually, Kex knows what he's talking about on this particular topic, but he also did an amazing episode with Ishtar, as well as with he did an episode with Purple, and I think Baxter was on that particular episode. But then Purple also did a standalone episode that talked about the bias of lore.
So good.
And and here's the thing is anyone who has done historical dives for research purposes, this isn't like a new concept. Even information that we have today in the real world is biased. There is no such thing as a completely unbiased presentation of information. Everything is biased by the individual presenting it or the individual reading it. There's bias in everything we do. And it's actually, and this is one of the beautiful things about Purple's explanation of this, because again, Purple actually, she is actually a historical archivist. She knows what she's talking about here. Is that it's not so much as the trying to remove the bias, it's trying to recognize the bias and take into account the bias. And that's a really big thing, especially for historical research, or any time you've had to do a thesis or anything like that. That's one of the first things you have to do is identify the bias and try to at least acknowledge it so that everyone is aware of that. And I really honestly, I coming from getting information from Halo lore and Elder Scrolls lore, this is kind of a conversation I had on Twitter as everyone was up in arms about this. I'm like, go read any Elder Scrolls lore. All of it is from in-game perspective. There's nothing in Elder Scrolls lore. There is now because we've been able to we've had so much information that we've been able to piece together very factual pieces. But there is no official there's no official connection or no official narrator in Elder Scrolls lore. It's all biased. And to go back to kind of what you guys were talking about with the text archives, the thing to remember with text archives is, again, that yes, that is, those conversations actually happened, but the people having the conversations were characters within this game world. They are biased towards their perspectives and experiences of the world, right? So they themselves do not have perfect knowledge. There is no such thing as perfect knowledge, which to me makes it so much fun. It's because you're constantly having to reevaluate where you're coming and what you're doing and all that. So,
well, it's do you read something as the Guardian, or do you read it as the player?
God, and speaking of, all right, yeah. Speaking of that, that's another video, and Beard's channel. Give Bourne's video a listen, because she does also an amazing job in presenting that exact question. And the thing is, it's not exclusive. Like, you can do both.
Not at all.
And actually doing both is where the fun really starts.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Like, I think that's where it gets endlessly entertaining. So.
I have 5 journal full that would say yes. I'm just saying.
And he writes tiny.
I write really tiny. It's like font 10. It's like really small. Anyway.
Oh man. All right. Well, let's start wrapping up. Let's start wrapping up and do what shout outs we got this week. Beard, what do you got for us?
Well, trying not to comment on what Green just typed in chat.
I'm mean sometimes, guys.
Is it?
I'll get you on the after show, you.
I'm
Is
not
it
staying,
okay?
but anyway.
What's that, Justin? I hear you, Justin. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
All right, shout outs for this week. I don't know. I'm honestly just gonna say, hey, Twitterverse. For the most part, I'm not absolutely admonishingly depressed this week because there's been a lot more people being positive, and I like that. There's actually been a lot of people that, be it for like different games or anything like that, like I doubt I had anything to do with it, but my statement that I made like a few weeks ago to just say, take a step back, pull yourself away from everything and just clear your head, regardless of whether my impact on it, that might have done anything, or if somebody else had said something, or it's just come full pendulum swing. And now everybody's just saying, yeah, maybe we should step away from things and let it cool off. Regardless, I'm very happy to see that everybody's just trying to enjoy themselves a little bit more. And that is something that I think has just been missing for the last several months. So definitely good on everybody at this point. Otherwise, the only other big shout out that I can honestly think of goes back to honestly Byth and Mylan this week, because I've been talking with them a lot more, and it's just one. It's great to always get in their heads because it's funny how similar the three of us kind of think. And additionally, it's also scary how similar the three of us think. But it's more because we're able to just kind of like collab on ideas, even if we're not collabing. And it's just nice to have that, to like this outlet, of course, here with Focus Fire as well. Just being able to talk with like-minded people and know that I'm absolutely not absurd in some mannerism. It's always a comforting feeling, especially when I'm still trying to get my mind in the exact right place I need it to be, which is getting much, much better. And once again, I rambled on and on and on. So I'm done. Thank you. I'm off my soapbox.
So Warlock Hive Mind confirmed, Green.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't know if the problem is, if I say yes, Warlock Hive Mind confirmed, I'm going to get lumped into that because Beard and I have been doing a lot of spin foiling together, and this gets a little awkward at that point because I've been asked like 3 times in the last month if I play Warlock. I'm like, guys, no.
No. I love like the moral indignation there. No.
No. Who wants to do that?
Oh, I don't. It's not that I don't want to do that. I just am really crappy at doing that.
I actually, the D2 Warlock is not as bad.
No.
The jump is significantly better. That's all I gotta say. That's my second.
And the award for best impersonation of a screen door goes to Beard.
But I know, speaking of positive things, Green, I know you had something that's really actually a really cool thing that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, we have some friends in the Focus Fire community and just kind of lore community in general. Yeah. Yeah, they're friends. They're friends. It's Hatchy Dave. You know Hatchy Dave.
Oh, yeah. He's my brother.
Yeah, so him and Average Joe and Sentinel Dad are putting together an event called the Saint 14 Project. If you haven't seen it on Twitter, it's kind of been going around a little bit, but I got a letter from them talking about it and just kind of asking us to put it out there. And so Hatchy says, "Hello, Focus Fire Chat. As a lore community, we know the importance of our beloved Saint 14. In the lore, not only was he an influential figure amongst Guardians, he was also a hero to the people of the Last City. It is, with this ideal in mind, that we choose Saint 14 to lead the charge in breaking the stigma of mental health amongst our Destiny community. And so, the Saint 14 Project was born, with the goal in mind of not only breaking the stigma of mental health, but also bringing awareness and support to our community as a whole. To accomplish some of these goals, we're cordially inviting each and every one of you to join us on our very first Saint 14 Project Mental Health Awareness charity stream in support of TakeThis.org on February 10th from noon to midnight Eastern Standard Time. Here's what to expect. Saint 14 Project has been busy. We have rallied the community, and the community has graciously answered our call. We have gathered a fantastic group of field professionals, community artists, and amazing streamers to bring you an educational yet entertaining experience. Did I mention the giveaways? Yes, there will be loot. So please join us on February 10th. For more information, follow us on Twitter at Saint14Project or email us at saint14project@gmail.com. And always remember, you are not alone, Guardian. And last but not least, thank you, Focus Fire Chat, for your support and helping us spread the word. We are all big fans and love your work. At Hatchet Dave, Average Joe, 227, and Sentinel Dad. Once again, thank you so much, and tell everyone that I love them from Hatchy Dave about the Saint 14 Project. So these guys have been working hard on it. I know they got a lot of people involved with it from all aspects of the community, not just like lore side. They've got artists in there. I would not be surprised if Belle's involved in some way, shape, or form. And that's next Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
All
the
right.
charity stream.
Justin, what
That's
about
my
you?
shout out.
Justin's shout out. It's hard to even go about even starting Justin's shout out. So first, I like to shout out the Honorable Mr. Kung Fu Frogs for getting married to Riachel and inviting me to said wedding, and then Blue for laughing at his own brother's wedding. And then also, just so everybody knows, I'm bringing a date. Yeah.
So we get to see Gavin?
No, there's no. That would be weird. No. I'm bringing an honest to goodness date, and she's a girl.
She's a girl.
And she's a girl, and she thinks I'm cute. No. What else was I going to say? Also, if you know Ben, could you find out if this is an open bar or not? Anyways, that's neither here nor there.
I was going to keep my comments away from Calm Down Murder Face, but nope, I think I got to make them. When did Metalocalypse get involved in this? Good grief, Justin.
Listen. You should not be so critical of me.
I get you your favorite thing. Disappointment.
Oh, God.
Oh, you're so pickles. I love it. Oh my God. Anyways, no, just wanted to say big shout out to everyone doing what you could, and also big shout out to all the Twitter well wishes for my sick son over the week. because he was very sick. And that's it.
All right. So shout outs, final comments from myself. Next week we are going to be talking about the Reef and the Awoken. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that or your answers to the community feedback, which was again at the top of the episode. Big shout out to Daniel J. Worthy, or I believe it's Worthy D, for Podbean patron. We really appreciate your support on that one. And also for those of you who are in live stream and are witnessing this random citizen who keeps trying to sell me this random pile of hydraulic things. I don't know what this is, but this guy will not leave me alone. So yes, big shout out to that random NPC in the tower. Good job, dude. You're not taking no for an answer. I keep telling him no. He keeps coming back. But yeah, so we'll run through an outro and probably stick around for a little bit of an after show. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on the new FocusFireChat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any questions or comments for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all of our amazing podcast partners within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.